Welcome to the Man of Recaps. This is Better Call Saul, Season 3. In the future, Saul Goodman's hiding out as the manager of a Cinnabon. One day he sees a shoplifter get caught, and he yells, "Kid, get a lawyer!" Which is a weird thing for a Cinnabon manager to yell, and then later he passes out. Whoa. Now, back in the present past, Jimmy had just admitted to his brother that he doctored the documents so that the Mesa Verde Bank would go back to his friend Kim. But he didn't know his brother Chuck was tape recording him, despite his allergy to electricity. Chuck tells his partner Howard, but Howard's like, "Hey, we can't use this as evidence." Chuck's like, "Don't worry, I've got a plan." Mike Ehrmantraut last season was going to assassinate old Hector Salamanca because he sent the murder twins to threaten his granddaughter, but back in his car, someone left him a note that said don't. Who tracked him out here? So Mike takes his car apart looking for the tracker bug, eventually finds it inside the gas cap. So Mike gets a tracker of his own and puts that one in his car, then he takes the original tracker and runs down the battery, so that night when someone comes to swap it out for a fresh one, they take Mike's tracker back with him. He tracks them to fast food joint Los Pollos Hermanos. If you've seen Breaking Bad, you know that's the cover for Gus Fring, the mild-mannered drug kingpin. So Mike gets Jimmy to scope things out, but the guy never meets with anyone because Jimmy wasn't paying any attention to the fast food manager sweeping the floor, and Gus Fring is onto him. Now Chuck has his assistant replace the batteries in the tape recorder, but it starts playing and he hears Jimmy's confession. Chuck's like, "Yo, don't tell anyone," but immediately he tells Kim, who then tells Jimmy. Kim's like, "Don't worry, he can't use that as evidence," but Jimmy's so mad his brother deceived him, he kicks down the door, grabs the tape, and breaks it in front of him, but Howard and this guy come out. It was a setup! Chuck knew Jimmy would break in there to destroy the tape, and now he's been witnessed breaking and entering. Later, Mike sees the trackers on the move, but it was a setup, they were onto him, and Gus Fring wants to meet in person. He's like, "Why didn't you want me to kill Hector Salamanca?" And Gus explains that if he was assassinated, they might come after him. Mike still wants revenge, so Gus is like, "Look, maybe we can hurt him a different way." So Mike goes to Mexico and throws some shoes over the wire. When Hector's drug truck comes by, Mike snipes the sneakers, which he put a bag of cocaine in, and so it sprinkles down over the truck. When these guys try to cross the border, they're taken in, and the ice cream shop Hector uses as a front is shut down. Now Hector and Gus both work for the big Salamanca cartel boss in Mexico, and Hector has always hated the chicken man. So he busts into the restaurant, and he's like, "Hey, now that my supply line's out, you're gonna make room for my product on your trucks." And little does he know, that's exactly what Gus wanted. Gus is like, "Yo, Mike, you've got real skills. You wanna work for me full time?" And of course, in Breaking Bad, that's how we first meet Mike. He's head of security for Gus. But for now, he's like, maybe later. Mike does have a buttload of cash that he stole from Hector Salamanca last season, and Gus is like, "Hey, the least I can do is help you launder it through my friend company Madrigal with this girl who is also from Breaking Bad." So Jimmy spends a night in jail, but they come to an agreement where if he admits to everything, he just gets a year's probation, but for sabotaging legal documents, he would definitely be disbarred, and that's all his brother Chuck ever wanted, for Jimmy to not be a lawyer. But Jimmy's not going down without a fight. Chuck had a backup tape, obviously, and they play it, makes Jimmy sound very guilty, and of course he is. But he argues that his confession was a lie. He was just concerned that his brother had finally gone off the deep end and only said that to make him feel better. Chuck explains that he is just fine mentally. His condition with electricity is a real physical thing. But Jimmy had it proven to him back in season 1 that that's not the case. So he's like, "Chuck, do me a favor, check your pocket." "What? Oh, it's a battery! What?" "Yeah, Jimmy had some guy sneak it in there," and he's like, "That's been in your pocket this whole time, you didn't feel it." So Chuck screams, "I'm not crazy," and goes on a huge rant about how much he hates Jimmy for being a sleazy con man, and unfortunately this makes him sound very crazy, and he realizes that his professional career is probably over. And Jimmy gets off with just a 1-year suspension. Now Hector Salamanca hates relying on Gus for his supply line. He goes to Nacho's dad's upholstery store, wants to use that to import drugs, but Nacho's dad is a straight shooter. He's like, "Get out of here, I'm not gonna do it." And Hector's like, "Yo, your dad might have to have an accident. Nacho's a good kid for a criminal. He's not gonna let that happen." Hector Salamanca's got a heart condition, and he takes these pills all the time, so he steals one. He goes back to his pharmacist friend he used to deal with in season 1. He's like, "Hey, I need a bunch of these pills, but they need to be fake." So there's a very intense scene where he has to swap them out, and boom, makes the switch undetected. So Jimmy can't practice law for a year, but he's made this great commercial and prepaid for a bunch of airtime, so he makes a new commercial about making commercials and selling his airtime, and he goes by the name of Saul Goodman Productions.
Saul Goodman. Yeah, it's like Saul Good, man.
So he's out there making local commercials, but no one wants to pay full price, so he's actually losing money. So he pays a visit to the old woman from the Sandpiper case. That was the big case he started, where the assisted living facility is overcharging its residents, and when they finally settle, Jimmy's gonna get a big chunk of cash. Turns out they've had their first settlement offer, and it is plenty big for Jimmy's tastes. As the class representative, this one old lady has the power to accept it, but the lawyers are telling her to wait for something bigger, so Jimmy decides she needs some peer pressure. He basically sows distrust amongst her friends until, before long, she's a social outcast. He goes so far as to rig a bingo game, which turns out to be the final straw. She breaks down, "Why do my friends hate me?" And it's absolutely heartbreaking. He's like, "Yo, maybe they just want you to accept the settlement." So Jimmy's gonna be a millionaire. Jim's like, "Hey, congrats, but I gotta run." She's had her hands full with the Mesa Verde, and she's doing so good they recommend another client, this big oil guy. So she's driving out to the meeting, but she's been getting way too little sleep, and oh no, falls asleep at the wheel and crashes. Seriously, don't drive drowsy, folks. She's okay, just a broken arm, but she decides to take a break from lawyering for a while and just take it easy. Almost losing a loved one makes Jimmy want to reach out to Chuck, but what's this? Chuck's got his electricity on. Having had it proven to him that his condition is mental, he starts really trying to overcome it. He's working with a doctor and everything. Pretty soon he can even go to the grocery store with mild discomfort, but after his breakdown on the stand, no one trusts him professionally anymore. Howard's like, "Hey Chuck, maybe it's time to retire," but Chuck's not having any of that. In fact, he would rather cash out his half of the firm, which would bankrupt it. He's like, "Look, no one wants that. Just keep me on here, it'll be fine." But Howard's like, "Look, I can't trust you anymore if that's your thing. I'd rather pay you off out of my own pocket." And he's gathered the whole company to give him a big farewell and send him on his way. But anyway, Jimmy's like, "Hey Chuck, I'm sorry. You're my brother and I love you." And Chuck's like, "Yo, don't worry about it, Jimmy. To be honest, I never liked you at all." Ouch. Now Hector Salamanca has a meeting with Gus and the representative for their boss. Turns out the chicken trucks are so effective, he only wants the drugs coming in that way. And Hector freaks out. He's super mad, and all his heart's given out, and his pills aren't working, so boom, Hector down. He survives though, and this is probably what leads to him being hospitalized for all of Breaking Bad. Nacho manages to switch the pills back before anyone notices, and now Gus and Nacho, what are they gonna do next season? We'll see. So Jimmy goes to congratulate old lady on her big settlement, but she's still so sad, her friends never forgave her. It's heartbreaking. Jimmy tries to fix it, but he did too good of a job of making them hate her in the first place. So Jimmy knows there's only one thing he can do to fix it. He hosts a session of chair yoga, but then he gets a lawyer from Davis and Maine to come and shout at him for manipulating these old people for his own gain. And he says awful things. "Oh, I hate old people. They're so annoying." But he intentionally left his microphone on so they all hear it, and the friends are back together, but all old people now hate him, which unfortunately destroys the pretty nice career he'd built in elder law. Meanwhile, Chuck turns off the power before bed one night, but the next morning he checks his meter and it's still running. So he starts checking the walls to see what's draining the power, and he ends up going full on crazy with it. He ends up in a worse state than he's ever been. Unable to trust his own mind anymore, he's kicking his lamp until knocks it over and a fire erupts. No! That's how season 3 comes to an end.